Sometimes history just turns on a dime. One single moment, one decision, one day can change absolutely everything. And that's exactly what we're diving into here. One of those days. A day that started a fight, sure, but it also ended up forging the identity of an entire nation.
And to really get a feel for what that moment was like, that sense of an unavoidable future, we can look to one of the key players, John Adams. He summed it all up in just 4 words. The die was cast. Wow. You can just feel the finality in that, can't you? It's him saying, that's it, there's no going back from this. So that's really the big question we're tackling. I mean, think about it. There were years of protests, arguments over taxes, all this tension just simmering under the surface. So what was it? What was that one moment where the talking finally stopped and fighting was the only option left? What was the real point of no return?
All right, so to find that answer, we've got to trace those heavy words from John Adams back to what actually happened. We're going to look at a very specific march and a very specific fight that would end up being the spark that lit the revolutionary fire.
And everything points to one single day in 2 little towns you've probably heard of in Massachusetts, Lexington and Concord. This is the place where that long simmering dispute finally just boiled over. It went from a disagreement to an actual open conflict.
Okay, let's break down how this all went down, step by step. First, you've got British troops marching out of Boston. What's their mission? Simple. Seize the colonists' weapons and gunpowder. But then, it happens. Fighting breaks out. A single shot is fired. Yep, the famous shot heard round the world. And in that instant, everything changes. That one act of violence completely transforms this military mission into the very first battle of a revolution. That was the point of no return.
So, the shooting started. But, an event happening is one thing. What it means to people is a whole other story. So now we're going to pivot a little. Let's shift from just what happened to how the leaders of the time actually understood this moment, the very people who would have to figure out what to do next.
And this is such a critical thing to think about. For us, this is all history, right? It's in the textbooks. But for them, this was their terrifying, uncertain reality. Can you imagine? What did this sudden explosion of violence actually mean to the people who would become the leaders of a nation that, well, it didn't even exist yet?
So let's circle back to John Adams. When he got the news, that's when he wrote those words. To him, this was no small skirmish. Nope, a line had been crossed. The die, like rolling the dice in a game of chance, it had been thrown. The outcome was suddenly out of their hands. War was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it.
Now, if Adams saw fate, George Washington saw something else. Urgency. The man who would become the commander-in-chief, he saw it with a different kind of seriousness. He said, "The crisis is arrived." For Washington, this thing they had all feared for so long, it wasn't a future problem anymore. It was here. It was now. The time for talking was officially over.
And then you've got Thomas Paine. What a writer, right? The great voice of the revolution. And he saw something completely different. It wasn't just a fight to him, or even a crisis. It was a purpose. He called it the cause of America. And with just those few words, bam, Paine elevates this local battle into this grand struggle for the very soul and future of a whole continent.
So think about this. You've got 3 of the most important leaders, and they're all pulling a different but equally crucial meaning from the exact same event. Adams, he sees finality. This is it, the point of no return. Washington sees urgency. The crisis is right here, right now. And Paine, he sees idealism, a grand national cause. It's wild. It's the end of something, the beginning of something else, and the reason for it all, seen through 3 totally different sets of eyes.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? How this one event was transformed in people's minds. So now, let's dig into how a simple fight over some weapons, became the very foundation of a nation's identity.
Let's really zoom in on that amazing phrase from Thomas Paine, the cause of America. I mean, what does that really mean? Well, it's about this huge ideological leap. It's the exact moment a squabble over rights and taxes becomes something so much bigger. It becomes the founding purpose of a new nation. It gave the fighting a kind of moral and political weight that it just didn't have the day before.
And so all of this leads us to one simple, unavoidable, and totally monumental conclusion. On that one day, in those little towns, because of that one fight,
The American Revolution began. That's the ultimate takeaway here. This wasn't just another battle. This was the birth of a war that would literally create a new country.
And that leaves us with one last pretty big question to chew on. We've seen that it happened, for sure. But it's really worth asking, how? How can one single day, a day filled with confusion and violence and just plain fear, how can that come to define the entire cause of a nation for generations? It's just a powerful reminder, isn't it? A reminder of how one single moment and the stories we decide to tell about it can literally shape the course of history.